Have you ever seen a $500 bottle of wine on a menu and thought, what super rich person actually buys it? You see, an interesting study was done. A restaurant put two beers on the menu, a premium beer for $2.50 and a cheap beer for $1.80. Well, 80% of people would choose the premium beer, not the cheap beer. In the study, a restaurant listed three beers on the menu, a premium beer for $2.50, a standard beer for $1.80 and a super cheap beer for $1.60. Now, 80% of people chose the $1.80 beer. In phase 3 of the study, they then offered three beers, a super premium beer for $3.40, a standard beer for $2.50, and a cheap beer for $1.60. And guess what? 80% of people chose the $2.50 beer. It makes you feel like buying that $15 glass instead of that $10 glass isn't such a big deal after all. See, NASA did a study with 1,600 kids aged 4 to 5 and gave them a creativity test. And guess what? 98% of them scored Creative Genius. 5 years later, they gave those same kids the same test. And guess what? Just 30% scored Creative Genius. Then, 5 years later, they gave those same kids the same test, and now just 12% scored Creative Genius. As the study showed, school and work teaches us to be afraid from diverging from the right answers for fear of being punished and judged. In 1992, NASA invented a test that showed how creative you are. They gave the test to 1,600 children aged 4 to 5. Over 98% scored Creative Genius. Well, just 5 years later, they gave that same test to the same children. After 5 years in grade school, just 30% of them now scored Creative Genius. Well, they then tested them 5 years later, and now just 12% scored Creative Genius. And so NASA gave it to a group of adults. And guess what? Only 2% scored Creative Genius. What NASA discovered is that chances are you are a creative genius, but that school and life stifles our natural talent because they make us afraid to come up with original ideas in case they end up being wrong. Looking for a daily dose of motivation to help you stay on task? Well, why don't you think of it like this, that you are doing something for yourself today that you will thank yourself for tomorrow. As Warren Buffett said, someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. As Warren Buffett famously said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. So here's how at age 15, I made $1,000 a day at my side hustle, which let me quit my $8 an hour supermarket job that I hated. So when I was 15, Nintendo was selling the Nintendo DS. Back then, if games were bad and sold poorly in the USA, it could take over a year for it to be released here in New Zealand. Well, that year, my family went to the USA and I bought an unreleased game. I finished it and traded it at my local GameStop. To my surprise, they gave me $35, which was 3 times the going price in the USA. It was cheap because nobody wanted it, but since it wasn't out here, our stores viewed it as rare and exotic. So I found more bad yet cheap exotic games on Amazon, and I imported as many as I could. Then, on one big trade-in day, I went to each store in my city and traded them 4 copies of each game per store. At the end of the day, I made over $1,000 in profit, which would have taken me 7 months to earn at my job. So I quit my job and made way more money with my video game arbitrage hustle instead.